is 6:03. I will now call to order the August 28th, 2017 meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. This meeting is being recorded. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items? Being none, we will move directly to, we have no public hearings or meetings, so we'll go to the request for certificate of compliance for 18 Clark Lane, Mass DEP file number 151213. Request for certificate of compliance relative to the construction of a single-family house in buffer zone. So the commission did a site visit on August 22nd. And just a few things we did not want to kind of pull out. So this is the as-built plan dated July 25th, 2017. Thanks. Yep. And then we actually have so we have the file that had.
You have a plan for the old?
I do. I'll pull out this one because I think this is pretty close to. So the plans. Fortunately, we have a plan that shows a house there. One of the concerns was that a much earlier iteration did not show a house on this lot. So this is March. Thank you. 2002. The plans, the final approved plans was February 25th, but I think what was added to the March one was this limit of lawn mowing. So.
Right, which is here.
So it looks like the house is, so it
looks
like it got moved into the buffer zone.
Very slightly.
Slightly more.
Right.
Than.
Correct.
But within an area that was going to be lawn.
Lawn area.
Anyway.
But also
The driveway got bigger.
they reduced the amount of lawn area. And here, this is woods.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of reduced in some areas and the corner of the house.
So the wooded buffer is more than what was originally approved?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess for the record, Mark So this is an old case of, a certificate of compliance was never requested or issued. Through a recent closing, the attorneys picked up on that. So that's why we're here tonight.
Yeah, let me find my notes here. So I think the good news here is the good news is that the deed did get the language about the property being subject to the Wetlands Protection Act. Naturally vegetated buffer 50 feet wide shall be maintained between the base of the lawn or other developed area and the wetland. Any work done in the buffer zone may require an order of conditions and or determination of applicability. So I feel like that's a positive that actually happened. I'm not terribly concerned considering this was 2002 and there's no oversight, not like the building corners were staked out and anyone checked that. So I guess the things we noted during the site visit was that over time it appears that someone is disposing of yard waste in the 50-foot buffer. So I would say that should cease.
Sure.
And be cleaned up. There's also
like a fire pit or
there's like a weird cinder
block
block fire
pit
pit in the woods, in the wooded buffer.
not recently, but it
Probably
had
from the previous one, only maybe.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Kind of rough shape.
It's really
Is it?
not a smart idea.
Okay.
It doesn't seem like the smartest place to build a fire,
Yeah, right.
surrounded by low branches.
Well, the trimmings are right near that area also.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's all kind of like off the corner of the house.
There's a little pathway to the woods.
Mhm. I mean, it definitely
Because
appears.
the new owners that are on here just had a closing this past summer,
Yeah.
so.
Just trying to order. So in the order, there were some special conditions. So 28 is that is the deed language, and that's in perpetuity, and it does appear to have been carried over. What was it? And there's something about removing, number 44 talks about removal of debris. All debris, including but not limited to pavement made of bituminous concrete, cement, concrete, bricks, brush, piles of leaves, stumps, lumber, metal piping, and other refuse and litter should be excavated or removed from the buffer zone and brought to a disposal site approved by the Board of Health. It looked like it was an old farm field beforehand,
this
so
whole
I'm
area.
assuming there must have been some dumping. But I feel like that would apply forward toward the 50-foot no disturb.
Sure.
So, so I guess, does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns to add?
What's the bylaw in 2002?
I think it was rescinded prior to that.
Right.
But let me. Let's see if there's any reference to it. No, filings as to municipal bylaw or ordinance, it's all blank. No. I think that went away and then by the late 90s.
Yeah, I was just curious to see if we would still like pretend, we would pretend as if there was a bylaw still. And then, you know what I mean, like, we would do the conditions or whatever. And if that was a no disturb zone or something like that.
Oh, I think it's just the,
What was
what
approved
was
and
agreed
proposed.
upon.
Right, yeah.
Which is great. So, I guess with that, the ongoing condition would be, condition 28 and 44. Condition 28 being the deed language, and condition 44 regarding debris and buffer zone. So would anyone care to make any motions?
I will make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance with the ongoing conditions 28 and 44 as discussed.
Second motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Fill this out. Thank you. You said you had copies of the notes? Oh, we have to make copies of this. Oh, great.
With the posted notes on it.
No, not the post-it notes.
Just once everyone signed it.
Yes.
Give you that. Thanks.
Yes, please. One copy? Two, please.
Two copies. When you're ready.
Just give me a moment, we'll give you, is it all right to give you the original, or do you want
Yes,
to?
yep, no, I will
Fantastic.
give it to Attorney Carey and record it.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks.
You need an elevator.
That was my joke.
You can bring the trombone in.
Great.
Or not, or we'll just bullet your lead.
Especially keep playing it.
Okay.
You do those doubles then?
I didn't. I guess you could. The copies would be fine. Thank you.
Mix 'em up.
Okay, moving on to the next item, a request for certificate of compliance relative to Paul Street Extension Stormwater Management System, DEP file number 151269.
So, this is for the Jillian Estates project. The commission has issued partial certificate of compliance for lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is the last component of the order of conditions as the buffer zone sits in here and affects lot 6. Lots 7 and 8, houses are constructed and completed. Lot 9 is the remaining house that's under construction now. It's about, or the shell is up and sided and 50% completed. So the plan shows that the infiltration system was installed. There are concrete chambers and the outfall as proposed on the plan. The storm drainage system and piping is installed. The storm scepter was installed prior to the infiltration system. And it is working like a charm. This whole infiltration system so far has taken every storm event. I've never seen any discharge from that pipe. It's just all being infiltrated back into the ground. Sands, you know, the soils are so great over there. So that, this would completely close out Jillian Estates as far as the commission is concerned.
Has the city engineer been on site at all?
I don't know, I haven't, I don't think so, I mean, he's still relatively new.
Yeah.
So I haven't, you know, I don't know if he's been out there or not, but I can forward this to him.
Yeah, I think, I'd like to do a site visit for this last piece of it, just because this is such a significant piece, with the as-built in hand.
Sure.
And try to schedule that so that Dan Murphy can be involved. I have no idea what his schedule is like.
Yeah, right. I don't know either, whether he can, because it's really after hours, right, for you guys? Or do you wanna try doing it during his hours, which are probably, what, 7, 3:30, I'm not sure what he, I know they used to be 7, 3:30.
Yeah, I'm gonna email him right now.
Okay, good.
Just to try to get that in a copy. Mark, I'm gonna copy you.
Okay.
Is this one where the city is taking over maintenance of the structure?
Yes.
So there was a stormwater ordinance permit as well as part of this.
And that's still open, right? That's a
Correct.
separate thing.
Correct.
Yep,
Which is under your
Yeah.
review and jurisdiction. Yeah.
yep, yeah, but you're not asking for ending that yet.
No.
Just have to close first before you can close that one.
Yeah, I don't know, we've never really closed one out
Yeah, right.
yet, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the process will be.
I think when the city accepts it,
Mhm.
maybe,
I think that makes sense, probably.
I don't think there's an official form or document that you, but I would say when they accept the roadway.
Mhm.
I mean, last winter, they plowed the street because of the, so they're at least plowing it during the winter time because of the residents that live on the street, so.
That's not a word. Bold. This is painful, I'm sorry.
Now we need elevator music.
If you were 16, you'd be done.
I am so far.
One thing I noticed is that there aren't inverts on the pipes on this. Do you have those? And yeah, I could add them in. Oh, they're in. Oh, Jesus, okay, got
Yeah,
it.
they're all right there.
That was very nice.
Yeah.
And the sewer system is a force main
Mhm.
that goes to a gravity sewer main at the intersection. So each one of these houses has a septic tank that collect the solids, and only the liquid from your waste is pumped up into the city system.
Mhm.
So every 5 years or thereabouts, depending on how much big a family you got in the house, you wanna have your system pumped up.
Sorry. That's bad for you. Okay, so, I've emailed Dan. I imagine he'll get back to me tomorrow
Yeah,
or the
right,
next
so
day.
whatever works.
He's been pretty responsive in the past.
Yes.
And I've copied you, Mark,
Yep.
and we'll try to make it as inclusive as possible, but, I'd really like the city engineer to be there, just given the city's role in this long-term.
And I'll forward him,
I added that into the email. I said Mark can
Okay,
forward you a video.
good. Yeah.
So we'll go from there, but is there a motion to continue to September 11th at 6 p.m.?
Move to continue to September 11th.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
And we'll,
And you
and
have
we got your,
copies?
and we have our copies, and, actually, while you're here quickly,
Yep.
just looking at Loven, no work this past week. This is from the
No.
August 18th week. So,
So all that they're doing now is bringing in material, even from that August 18th. They're just bringing in material, just stockpiling.
okay, questions?
So-
I went out and looked at the site, I didn't see any invasive starting anywhere other than the Phragmites kind of pushing in from, that was already there. It was
Yeah,
established on
right.
the edge, but it's
Right.
kind of, it's up to the order of the limit of work, so.
Okay.
Right. And, the grass around the basin
It looked pretty good.
looks, came in real nice, and along the slope on the left as you're going down there, you seeded all that, so. So again, it's something that he does when he can, because he's got to
Yeah,
Run a business.
run a business too.
right, understood. And it is a busy time of
Yeah,
year.
right,
All
so he
right.
can pay the bills. The other thing, just right here,
Mhm.
Williston, two things. One, we have the cross-country, actually, just one, cross-country trail. I've talked to Jeff Tannen about this fall doing the wetland replacement,
Okay.
which is up in Park Street.
Mhm.
So he and I are gonna get together. I, recommended that it be done in, end of September, beginning of October. So we'll have the best success rate.
Okay.
The solar project, that was for that lot is on hold and at current time is not moving forward because of requirements from Western Mass Electric.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that's ever gonna
Okay.
go anywhere.
Well, doesn't have to.
Right.
Appreciate the update.
Yes. And the abutter to the north would like to mow the field and try to get some hay out of it. So it'll be at least some good use of.
Has it been mowed previously?
It's gonna take a little bit of work to get it, because it, was left dormant for so many years.
Yeah.
In some of the areas, I mean, it's, there's not a lot of good stuff out there, and I think once they realize, they hay their field to the north, but once they, I think, really take a close look at it and realize how much.
So I think what Jay's getting at is the exemption doesn't
5
apply
years.
because it hasn't been in agricultural use.
Right,
So it wouldn't,
so,
just trying to visualize that area and I'm
right.
doing terribly at
So I mentioned it,
Mhm.
I mentioned to Jeff that, yeah, right, they can mow the upper portions of it, but
Yeah, not
couldn't go through
in-
the wetlands.
it. Right, well, they can't go in buffer zone
buffer zone,
without the
right.
without,
Right. So-
at least an RDA, and that would depend on, what they're doing and how much they're moving for that.
Right.
Just trying to, okay, so they hayed this field,
Right,
but this hasn't been hayed
right.
per se, so
Right.
if they were to do that, they would have to come before the commission to do
Mhm.
that.
Correct.
Okay. You already have a delineation.
Right, exactly.
There you go.
So
Okay.
maybe something useful out of it. I think that's it.
All right, I think we're good for now then.
All right.
Thank you for the updates.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Have a good
See you
evening.
tomorrow.
That's your, okay, 2 copies.
Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
Take care.
Hey, good to see you, Mark.
Yep.
Okay. All right, in the spirit of keeping people moving along.
Sure.
we're
I
gonna-
brought an old map. Visuals are always good. I don't know what the questions are gonna entail, but,
So,
sitting in my basement, so something to refer to anyways.
there you go.
And, Ask away.
So the commission has asked Gary to come in for an update. We're in year 2 of the Nashawanic Pond Vegetation Management Program. Gary's kind of the vegetation management program, so he knows the most about it. Just get an update, see how things are going. Go from there with some Q&A.
Okay.
What's been going on? What have your observations been?
Okay, so on July 24th, a treatment occurred. We treated 10 acres of macrophytes and 5 acres of algae, and we will take advantage of this.
Where were these acreages?
Yeah, so this was from 2015. I don't know if I'm blocking people
I don't
on
think you could
TV.
even see it anyway.
Okay,
but,
so we'll ignore them. This was 2 years ago, I'm sorry, 1 year ago. This year, I don't have an updated map for you, but we treated last year, mostly up in this area here, along the perimeters. We took a swipe through this White Brook Cove area here, and we came into here, 15 acres of macrophytes, 15 acres of algae. After looking at what the vegetation looked like this year, it was decided that we would treat 10 acres of macrophytes and 5 acres of algae, saving the city, well, a little over $1,000. Plus, why put more chemicals in there than necessary? As we all know, we don't want to eradicate macrophytes, we don't want to eradicate algae. They're good for a pond, so that was never the goal. We did find that after treating the Eurasian milfoil last year, not a lot came back. And what did come back this year, when I was out on the pond on Friday, I saw just a couple little strands. So as far as keeping the milfoil in check, that's been very successful. the macrophytes have been very successful. I think there's been concern about seeing a lot of the floating algae that's been in the center of town and so on. I've received a couple of emails and some photos sent to me. Ironically, I was on vacation, and when I came back, I rode through the center of town. It looked beautiful. I mean, it was like, my God, what are you guys talking about? But then I drove a little bit further down by a boathouse area, and I could see some of that floating algae, and it does seem to come and go, come and go. What happened was that the 10 acres of macrophytes that were treated had algae on them. I put a little sample under a microscope, and from what I could gather is the main algae is Edagonium. I had to look that one up, I don't know how that one on top of my tongue. Which is very common to attach to macrophytes. They have these holdfasts on them. And rather than just be free-floating, which it can be, they like to attach themselves to something. And in this case, macrophytes are perfect because they can get nutrients from them. So as the macrophytes were dying after the treatment, all this algae that was attached to them stayed as long as they could because they were getting the nutrients from the decaying macrophytes. But once the macrophytes died, they now became free-floating. So it's not like all of a sudden we had this big algae bloom. It's just that the algae that was attached now was free-floating, and it became a lot more obvious. So it's not like we all of a sudden had this big bloom. It just kind of relocated itself. And I had mentioned to the city that part of the problem is the dam was blocked. All kinds of debris in front of the dam, logs, just all kinds of stuff. So even though water was going over the dam, the algae couldn't. It would reach a certain point, want to go to the dam, but because of the debris in front of it, it would just gather in the center with no place to go. I mentioned it to the city. I think somebody went out there, because when I looked again, it looked like some of it had been removed, but then I just decided to take it upon myself to remove the rest. I just took a roof rake, reached over, and was able to remove a lot of it, and that cleared up a lot of the algae. The other thing we're fighting is weather. As beautiful as the weather has been, we haven't had any rain, for a long time, except for one rain event that I can think of. So you're not getting a lot of flow. Standing at the old boathouse beach, I can actually watch the floating algae move away from the dam, where it's flowing south instead of flowing north. And we're also not getting a lot of wind. What wind we do get is not blowing north, it's blowing south. So it's just kind of stagnated at this point. It has gone into some of these cove areas here, and once it goes into the cove area, it's not going to be blown away. I actually just when I was out there on Friday, I just kind of like moved it away from some of these cove areas, just so it could float further on down, so it could have a place to go. But the main thing that I see from this is that, number one, we have the Eurasian milfoil under control. That seems to have worked really well. I did see a few water chestnut plants, which I hand removed. This goes back maybe 5-6 years now, but we removed something like 22 tons of it at one point. I mean, so it's going to come back, a plant here, a plant there, the little nutlet falls, and it just propagates and it comes back. But that's pretty much under control. The macrophyte situation looks really good. There's still macrophytes in this cove here because a lot of this is a pond we call amplifolius, and amplifolius is resistant to herbicides. But that's fine because we do want macrophytes in our pond anyways. This year we were able to hit this cove a lot better. We were able to go further down towards the Bradbrook mouth a lot more, because last year it was really successful. We were able to treat areas this year that we weren't able to treat last year. Now, going forward, we might consider skipping a year. We don't know. I'll have to, that's not my call. I can only talk to well, we'll have a new mayor, so it's ultimately, it's up to the mayor to make a decision on whether to treat or not. But Mayor Karen's been pretty much, you know, whatever the pond committee wants to do, she's on board with and whatever, and they've kind of looked to me to kind of give them a little guidance on that part. So it's something to consider, you know, or if we do treat, it might even be less again. So that's ultimately the goal, keep the macrophytes under control, keep the algae under control, but treat as little as possible. You know, as much as these chemicals are safe, you don't want to put any more chemicals in there than you have. But I'm thinking long term. I'm not thinking of the fact that we have some algae floating in the pond right now and it's not aesthetically as pleasing. I'm looking at the fact that eventually that algae will go away and we didn't have to treat it with chemicals. So not only save money, we didn't put chemicals in the pond. So I know there's been a little concern about seeing the algae, and rightfully so. People are like, wow, what's going on? We just treated this pond, and why do we have this, you know, green stuff floating here? The other thing that you can see within the algae is a lot of wolfia, which is very small, like microscope, I don't want to call it microscope, but very small, like a duckweed. Very hard to treat because there's very little surface area. And all these herbicides that we treat with have to have surface contact. So when you have something that has very little surface area to start with, it's hard to treat it. So mixed in with that algae is wolfia. But again, it's not a bad thing to have. You know, we do want, it's all part of that food chain. You know, you've got to have the macros, you've got to have the algae, but in the right amounts. So I think that's pretty much where we're at this point. Any additional concerns, questions?
You said that milfoil was decreasing?
Yeah, when I first saw it, I don't know if I was the first one to see it, but I think I was the first one to mention it to the city. It wasn't prolific, but it was there. And, you know, the Eurasian, there is a native milfoil, so we have to be careful when we use the term milfoil, but the Eurasian milfoil, as we know, can really take over a pond in a very short period of time. So that was a big concern to get that under control before it became prolific. So this year, like I say, even prior to the treatment, there wasn't a lot of it that I found. And now, after the treatment, I found a few little pieces. You know, there could be more than what I found, obviously, but it's certainly a minor macrophyte at this point. And as long as we keep an eye on it, it should stay in check.
Yeah. Do you think there's a possibility that maybe next year you just treat the algae and not the milfoil? Or?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. The reason we only treated the 5 acres this year was, number one, the part that was actually free floating, that algae, was very small. Mm-hmm. So even though we knew that the algae would come off the macrophytes once the macrophytes died, really kind of hard to get a handle on how much was actually attached, you know, as far as what it was going to look like and so on. But that could certainly be a possibility. The possibility is that, you know, we skip the year completely. You know, see how it looks towards the end of this growing season, which is, you know, cooler nights are coming in and cooler weather's coming in. So I don't think we'll get a lot of regeneration at this point. And it's always hard because you have to make that call prior to the macrophytes and algae coming in because of the paperwork involved. You've got to, you know, file a good at least month. I wouldn't even want to wait that much because by the time you get the information back on whether or not you can treat, they say at least a month. And so I want to make sure it's at least a couple months. And then so you're basically doing the paperwork in early spring when the pond looks great. Yeah. So you know you could do the paperwork and spend all that time and energy doing it, and then decide there's really very little to do this year. So I will be there is a National Aquatic Pond Steering Committee open house here, I don't know about this room, but in this building on Thursday, and I'll be attending that. If anybody else wants to attend that, feel free. And I'll be talking with the members that night. And again, ultimately, it's going to be up to the mayor to make that decision on whether or not to treat. I can only make recommendations.
Do you have any pictures showing the change from the year to year, or data, or anything that kind of?
I've got a
sets up
lot of
additional-
pictures, yeah. Not sure the best way to get them to you, but I do have pictures. I have, well, through Dan, I sent pictures pre-treatment, but that didn't really show a lot because I showed pictures of the 4 areas where the dissolved oxygen readings were being taken. And some of those areas were not the areas that had a lot of macrophytes, and they were good areas to take dissolved oxygen readings, but not necessarily representative of the macrophyte population. But I've got pictures going back so many years that they're available. I took some more on Friday. I do have others pre-treatment. I have them last year, so they're available. If you'd like to see them, just tell me the best way to get them to you, specifically what years, what times are you looking for, and I can certainly make arrangements to get them to you, or the entire commission.
Yeah, I think I'm just curious to see some sort of proof of the impacts of how it's changed.
I mean, you can hand pick your picture and you can make anything look great.
And it's hard to see.
But if you're showing the same area, year after year after year, and again, we're not trying to hide anything, it's right in the center of town, so you're not in the middle of, nowhere. Obviously, people know what you're doing, know what it looks like. So I could definitely give you some pictures.
Yeah.
If you go out and just paddle around.
Well, that's the best option, and if while you're out there, you want to just kind of move some of that algae out from the little coves and push it out to where the flow can take it away. That's fine too. I'm just a little nervous about telling, whoever's out there to do that because, not so much the algae, but the macrophytes. A lot of times they reproduce simply by fragmentation. So you got people all of a sudden now pulling on macrophytes, and all of a sudden you have 1 strand, and now you have 2 strands, and 4 strands, et cetera, et cetera. So not always the best thing to do is just grab the stuff to move it down because you could be doing, the pond a disservice. But
I have a question. What is the algae called? Do you know the scientific name of it?
Edygonium.
Edygonium.
It's actually a pretty common filamentous algae, and again, one of its characteristics is that it has part of the structure is it has a thing called a holdfast, and the holdfast just likes to attach itself to whatever it can attach itself to. If it can attach itself to something like a macrophyte, that's what it's going to do. But it's also a good indicator of the health of a pond because it lives in clean water. So if it was, a polluted pond, you couldn't have that species living there. It's kind of a wimpy species that needs clean water. So it's actually a good indicator of the overall health of the pond.
Won't survive
Well, you'd be surprised though, some of the worst looking ponds out there as far as macrophytes and algae and the rest are not necessarily unhealthy. They're just prolific in nutrients and, especially if they're shallow, slow moving water, there's a lot. But as far as the water actually being tainted as far as, unhealthy, kind of hard to tell by just the appearance of the macrophytes and the algae.
At the meeting on Thursday, would you be showing, results from the application or anything like that if somebody wanted to go?
I was just planning on showing up. I'm not part of the committee at this point, and they asked, I do know there's a little presentation that's just going to loop itself, but that's more of a background of, how the pond was built, why it was built, where it is now, just some kind of an overview, but I really don't know what to expect because the only thing I was told is we'd like you to attend if you can, and I said I would, and that's about as far as what I know.
Okay.
I won't be in the area. Sorry. Can't attend.
We've now changed the date just.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
All I actually, I wouldn't have changed my travel plans, but be good to know when other ones are coming up.
Yeah, like I say, I'm in the loop a little bit at this point, simply because I interact with, on projects like this, but a lot of what the National Wildlife Pond Steering Committee has become at this point, because all these projects are already come to fruition, a lot of it's fundraising, and just education at this point. We've had some, well, actually they've been around for quite a few years now, but some members that really kind of like energized the committee, and they've taken it on a different route to where they're raising awareness of what's happening and where it's been, where it's going, and Facebook sites now. Everybody's got a Facebook site, so the pond now has a Facebook site. But a lot of it's just keeping the public informed as to what's going on. There's we know that there's now paddle boats and canoes you can rent. There's dragon boats that are going to be on the pond, and if you want to I guess it's going to be a tug of war there. You can get a group together. You could actually get I think it's this year. I think it's school members, like one middle school versus a high school or something like that. But could have a conservation commission against a planning board or something.
So we're good here, huh?
Yeah.
Wait, you don't want to be part of that?
That's good. It lasts like 10 seconds.
I actually missed last year.
Wait, that's right, because it's one boat with half the people on one end of the boat and the other half the people on the other end of
And
the
you
boat.
see which way it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I saw some videos of it, but ordinarily that's not what you do with a dragon boat, but on a pond this size, it's a good
Pretty much what you can do with a
what you can do, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else?
It's good to understand about the algae and
Yeah,
where it came from,
no,
so.
I definitely appreciate the in-person update. There's,
Yeah,
There's a lot more
I
going
can
on.
understand the concern. I would almost gather to guess that if the algae wasn't as obvious as it is, that I may not be sitting here now.
Right.
But considering it is, so take-home message is, it's not that more algae is now in the pond, it's just that it's kind of come off the macrophytes. And of course, the algae that was treated has now come to the surface. A lot of this is submerged, and as it comes to the surface to die. So you're seeing some of it just come to the surface to basically decay, and then it'll sink back down. But the less that we have decaying in the pond, the better off we are, obviously.
Wait, can you just like scoop it up?
You
and
can,
put it
you
somewhere?
literally can. I mean,
Dry.
there's no reason in the world why you can't physically remove this.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of this on Friday. Again, my main thing was to just, instead of standing on the shoreline, to get on the pond and see exactly what's going on in the middle. But other than just kind of move it out from some of the coves so it could get, swept away with the little current that we have, you can just take your hand and just get it out of the pond, just throw it onto the shore, just,
Let it dry out or something?
yeah, it'll just desiccate and die, absolutely. So if anybody, again, I was a little nervous about telling people to go out and start scooping things out, but it should not be an issue.
And so moving forward, I guess I'm confused. It sounds like you're saying putting chemicals into the pond is not a great thing to keep doing. And so are you advocating not to keep doing it, or really it's just up to the mayor?
If there was an alternative to treating chemically, I would be on board with that. There isn't an alternative for National Wildlife Pond. We have a 30-acre pond, we have a 10 square mile watershed. And all the nutrients from that 10 square mile just, it's like collecting in a bowl. So we're not gonna be able to control if we could control the watershed, then we wouldn't have to worry about doing in-pond type of treatments. But because it's such a large watershed, it's not necessarily, that's a bad thing, but we have to be judicious in our treatment. The last thing you wanna do is somebody come in here and say, yeah, I just wanna treat the pond with as much as we can every year, year after year after year, because it still is a chemical. And anytime that you have macrophytes or algae dying, you know, they do have to be decomposed, they do use oxygen. So we want to make sure that we keep it under control so we don't have to all of a sudden go back to treating 15 acres. Because they only let you treat half a pond at one time. That's, you know, this was about a 30-acre pond. That's why last year we treated about 15 acres. They're not going to say, go ahead, treat 30 acres. They just won't allow that. Usually the maximum is half the pond size. And because it hadn't been treated for so many years, it really needed the 15 acres of both treated. This year we were able to treat a little bit less. Going forward, we might be able to treat even less, or I'm sure at some point, I shouldn't say sure, I'm never sure about anything, but it's likely that we'll skip a year at some point, whether it's next year or the year after. But the smaller amounts that we can use, the better off we are. Because, like I say, it still is a chemical, but it's a better alternative than to just let the pond basically die at this point. Too much time, too much energy has gone into maintaining the pond and bringing it back. And this is sort of like one of the last steps, a maintenance step. You know, in my lifetime, we're never going to see another dredge. You know, I would be shocked if we see another dredge in my lifetime. The shoreline's been stabilized. The one thing that we do need, and there just isn't the funding for it at this point, but maybe someday I'll be sitting in front of you guys or somebody else will, is the maintenance of the Gabion weir. Right, there's the siltation issue. There's a Gabion weir on Whitebrook and a siltation basin on Bradbrook. Both of them are to their pretty much to their maximum already. The problem is that there isn't funds for this. So that's another maintenance issue that, you know, if money somehow all of a sudden magically appeared, we'd be coming, because that permitting has been done. Right, you know, moving forward, the permits are in place. We may get to the point where they time out though, and may have to come back for extensions. I'm not sure on the timing of those, but I think they're probably like maybe another year on them, if that.
I don't know off the top of my head
Yeah.
for sure.
But I do know, I spoke with Army Corps of Engineers about this last year, because our former city engineer said that he was gonna take on the project of cleaning out behind the Whitebrook. This isn't Jim, this was the,
Oh, Jim's predecessor.
well, after Jim.
Oh,
The short
I
lived,
see, like,
Yeah, there, and he had great plans, but, you know, his stay here was short. And what we were under the impression that, you know, he was going to take care of it using, you know, city employees, city equipment. And now that he's moved on, it doesn't look like that's feasible any longer. But, you know, if grant money came in or somebody donated, because now, you know, it's crazy because they gave me, and we're 81 maybe, I don't know, a long time ago, it was like $10,000. Now it's like $50,000, $60,000 just to dig out from behind it. You know, the siltation basin was like $30,000. Now it's like $250,000 to maintain it, you know, so, and it's not gonna go the other way. It's just gonna get more and more expensive.
Well, thanks for coming in, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
That was helpful.
Well, just I'm a phone call away. You know.
thank you,
And
appreciate
we
your
didn't talk
time.
about Scott Jackson's course, so that was, you
Was
were.
that your?
Yeah, thank you. You were lucky you got into the field part, and that was fucking good. But anyways,
All right, we'll
take
see you.
care,
Thanks,
everybody.
Gary, have a good night. Okay, so moving, I'm just gonna keep things moving here. We have no emergency certifications, no updates regarding enforcement actions. Are there any updates about Equidale?
We received the invoice from Politan for the management plan and survey, and
Is it Politan or Land Stewardship?
land stewardship. And
Thank you.
Politan, somebody else could probably explain this better, I just figured it out at the meeting
They're
last
two
time. Chris
branches.
Politan is the person, doesn't he like the?
I think Land Stewardship bought Politan, or was it the other way around?
It felt like they were the same thing now.
If they
Maybe
merged.
Politan doesn't
I think
exist.
they merged.
Their
He
website
just
says
sold
that
it, sorry.
I think,
land stewardship is the contracting, entity and Politan is a consulting entity. So, I don't know,
So, yeah, that
never
one.
know.
And stewardship.
We know who we're
slash
talking
politics.
about.
Yes, exactly.
And then Jess, she talked about the RDA, she's writing the RDA, right?
Yes. I think
Oh,
so.
she said she was
last
going
week.
to.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will get their land stewardship slash Politan's estimate for the work, that invasive work.
Okay, great.
And I let the Park Hill Orchard folks know what we're up to, so they know.
Thank you. Okay, compliance updates. I'll let everyone know when possible dates and times for the site visit for the stormwater system for Paul Street Extension, Jillian Estates. Anything about Pleasant Street Mills? I think
We
Jess
haven't
still.
heard anything yet, she's chasing people,
Nashwanik Mills, 15 Cottage.
nothing I can see
Nothing.
happening.
Dave Boyle, A to Z, they're still building.
Golden Way.
Lathrop just did another round of management activities, mid-August.
We had an email.
There was an email.
Wait, so they actually did something or
They
they're gonna do?
did stuff.
Did stuff?
They gave us notice that they were gonna do stuff,
Yes, we assume they did stuff,
so we think they did stuff.
They offered to
but
bring
they had a
in
permit.
Stuff.
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 It's like the thing with the thing with the thing.
Yeah. With Politan slash Chris slash land stewardship.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, we've gotten updates regarding Williston, Nashwanik Pond, and Loven, and there are no updates I know of regarding Cumberland Farms. All right, meeting minutes.
I
Let's-
found some boo-boos on the last minutes as I've been going through here.
Take a look at those then. But before we do that, can we address,
Oh, hey, look at that.
could it get fixed?
There's some of them, that one.
July 10th.
wasn't there.
So we do have quorum for this, myself, Julie, Jay, and Colleen. And this was just, it was not a clean version at the last meeting from July 10th. So is there,
Motion to approve the
Motion to
minutes
approve.
from July 10th.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
So
Aye.
moved. You cannot vote, you were not here.
I mean,
I think you meant it's
Got it?
passed.
yes.
Thank you. Okay. How about those August 14th meeting minutes?
Did they pass muster with you, Dan?
They passed the mustard.
Move to approve the minutes from August 14th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Anything else?
Mail. Oh, sorry, I didn't need to bring that up.
Move to ignore it.
There's really just, there's,
You're out of order.
You're out of order. This is on my chair of recycling.
I thought you got that.
I did, it's recycling, I didn't wanna get it confused. So, you said, yeah, you and Dan could just fill in your information, and we still don't have Ashley here, so we'll just put it back in the box.
What's that thing?
It's MACC or something.
It's a different process every single year.
Yeah, no, she must be.
Any further discussion? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 6:56.